Hey everybody, welcome. I'm Chris Gear, and I know most of you, or if not all of you, already. We've met, and I appreciate seeing you again. I am MyStar's professional learning coordinator, um, and I am also a retired middle school science teacher, and I taught MyStar in my classroom before I retired, and I have worked with MyStar since 2015 as a teacher to help them write and pilot and provide feedback and stuff on units. So with me today is Lindsay Watch, who is
recording in progress.
One of our MyStar curriculum writers. And she also works with the professional learning team. And Barb McIntyre is here also, and she is also a retired MyStar teacher, and she is one of our assessment experts. And so I'm going to let Barb explain to you some of the cool things that are in the new units regarding assessments. All right, thanks everybody. So it looks like in group one, everybody's using enhanced units, and some people are kind of moving slowly from the originals to the enhanced units as they get updated. In group three, also kind of moving into them, but it takes time and to learn the new units, and certainly that would be a barrier. It's, everybody's prep time is always compromised. Hoping for more student engagement, and the unit summary tables are awesome study guides. Good. And the originals, because you're familiar, it doesn't require training time, and you maybe already have the supplies to do them. And team two didn't record anything. So anybody who was in group two want to just kind of summarize? What did you guys find out?
Well, some of us are using the enhanced units and a combination of both. And we like personally, like Mark and I, like the new enhanced ones because it's easier to take some of the unit challenge scenarios. There's a lot more embedded resources included, reteach resources. So those have been really, wonderful. And we also use the common assessments are used as a common assessment for everyone to measure mastery and progress for our students.
Okay, awesome. You broke up just a little bit, but I think I heard that there are lots of things in the newer units that are useful to you. Good. So our goal here today is to give you some time if you haven't used the enhanced units, or maybe you just started to use them, but there might be some things in there that you're not familiar with, how they work, what they can do for you, why they might be useful. And so we're just going to take a little time to kind of go through them, and we'll give you some time to dig in, and so that hopefully, when we're done in about an hour from now, you have them going forward. It doesn't take you extra time to figure out, oh, what is this resource and why would I want to use it? So that's kind of our goal. So Lindsay's going to start us off talking about the three newest units, our last three units that were just published, and then she's going to show us, if you are interested in one of the enhanced units, how you can see an overview of how it's same or different from the older one, and that might help make that decision. And then I'm going to help you dig into a few of the features that you may not have, you may have kind of skipped over in the lesson plan because it, took a little time to figure them out and you weren't really sure what they were. So we'll take a look at those. And then Barb's going to give you some ideas and some practice opportunities to use some of the new resources that are provided in assessments. So I'm going to turn this over to Lindsay.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Lindsay Watch, and I work on the curriculum development and professional learning teams with MyStar. And so I actually helped work on some of these units that you're going to hear about today. So we did publish the last 3 units. So the entire curriculum is now, all of the units are enhanced. So they have all these great features you're going to hear about today. And so the last 3 are 6, 7, which was cycling of energy and matter through food. And so that unit challenge is pretty similar, still using that food scraps for fertilizer concept with the farmer that wants, the lunchroom food scraps, but it is much, much shorter. Chris and Tony did an awesome job kind of really condensing that one and pulling out those key features, really emphasizing that photosynthesis and respiration to help keep that unit targeted. And also includes a food webs off the shelf lesson in case, your students maybe need some refresher or didn't get a great coverage of those concepts in 5th grade. And there's an formative assessment opportunity there in lesson 1 to help you figure out if you might need to use that off the shelf lesson. And then 7-2B is the rock cycle. And so that is a similar unit challenge to the original version. This beach sand is disappearing. Someone thinks it's being stolen. The other group says no. And so, students have to collect that evidence to prove what's really going on with the sand. More of an emphasis on the rock cycle this time around, which we think gives, a better coherence to that storyline of the unit. And including that weathering and erosion, because really that's the key to this unit. It adds 1 lesson to the original lesson sequence, but we really think it's worth it. And the lessons are pretty tight, so it's not they're not really long. Lots of days to teach them. So hopefully that extra lesson isn't too much more for you. And then the last revised unit is 8-5B. It's on weather. And so we kept that engaging unit challenge scenario about the snow day policy in Michigan and, arguing you can't just have the 2 snow days because there's such a wide variety of weather that happens, particularly in Michigan. But really more emphasis on air mass characteristics, setting that stage, that foundation for how weather happens and how weather patterns are created. And we did some reorganizing of the lesson order to help support that student understanding a little better. And so if you're wondering what's different, what's changed, what's similar, we have links here on this slide, slide 10, of each of the 3 enhanced units. So they kind of give an overview of, unit challenge changes, if there's any materials changes. It gives a summary of the storyline so you can see, which lessons, the order, if it's changed, you might be able to recognize familiar concepts from the original. And so that'll give you a great overview of what has changed from the original version. If you're not interested in one of these 3 units, but you want information on a different unit, you can find that on our Curriculum Enhancements Roadmap document. And so that gives you the link to every single unit updates overview for all of our units that we've for the whole curriculum. And so right now we're going to give you a moment to look at one of those. You could look at one of the newest 3 that we just published here in the last, I think it was in January. Or if you, this will be an individual activity. So if you aren't interested in one of those units, you don't teach those, that's not in your scope and sequence. We would like you to maybe select a different unit from the list. Maybe one you're like, gosh, I'd really like to check out the new version of this one. So find a unit that you're interested in, and we'd like you to do just a quick notice and wonder. So looking at that units updates overview document, and what do you notice about the unit updates, and what do you wonder about the information that we've given to you there? Yeah, these are some great noticings and wonderings. I see the one, do you recommend both 8-5A and B back to back? If you have the time, that is really, we encourage that because 8-5A is climate. And so that's going to help set the stage for that global, movement of air, of, Coriolis effect and things. And so that'll help apply in the 8-5B in the weather unit. So it really builds on those concepts. Yeah, we tried to bring in the 10-day forecast in the weather unit to make it relevant to students. They're going to have to look at the weather to decide what to wear. So giving them that real life experience. You like the sense of competition in 7-2B. Wondering if there's enough time to teach. If you have questions about pacing, scope, and sequence, you can always reach out to us and we can help, provide insight on that. Yeah, good. Not having to rush through things. The fun social media post for Save Our Snow Days, hoping to get that technology incorporated for, engagement for students. And yeah, teaching that weather unit, we recommend December or January to really bring in that interest, because they could be doing this in real time and there's a snow day calculator that's used. So, if you're coming up on maybe it's going to be a snow day, you can actually put in your information and they can do this in real time. Let's see, what else do we have? And then a couple 7-2B questions about materials, and that might be for Barb if she
Sure.
might know. I was going to pull up the material list, but
And even with on slide 12 with the 85A and 85B, I would say there's a little bit of overlap too. So, we look at orographic effect and lake effect, and we look at it from a climate standpoint in a larger scale. So we look at like marine climate, and then we look at lake effect, smaller scale in the weather unit. So you might be able to consolidate a few lessons if you're doing both of them. So you may be able to get the 85B orographic lake effect maybe a little faster for you. You might not have to do everything in those lessons. The 7.2B rock shake containers, when I did this in my classroom, I used a plastic container, and we would play like shake music. So we would do, Shake It Up by the Cars and some other things, and we would shake to the beat to try and keep it consistent. But we also would like say, you're shaking, but you're not like rocking it out and breaking the container. So we kind of gave like an example of this is how hard you're shaking, and you're shaking to the beat. So we tried to keep it consistent. So that might help a little bit. For the station set up, which particular activity were you referring to? I'm trying to remember, it was a long time ago. Is it the rock one where you're doing the crayon melting and the shaving of crayons?
No, it was the shaking of the container and the plaster of Paris on the balloon, and the 3 things of weathering with the penny in the vinegar and the chalk in the vinegar, and you definitely have to have the right kind of chalk. Anyway, there were 5 different activities, and now there are fewer activities than that.
You may want to consider some of those as demos. I did the balloon with the plaster of Paris with my whole class, and I tell you what, it was hours of cleanup afterwards. It was a mess, that plaster of Paris. I would do that as a demo, or maybe have each group do one activity and then share out kind of thing. I would also say with the shaking, I did not do that with every group. We had the containers, and like I said, we would play shaking music. I can't remember all of them. We did like jump in line and shake by the Cars, and then we would pass it kid to kid. And so it was like quick, shake, pass, shake, pass, shake. So everybody got a chance to shake, and then the other kids were dancing as people were shaking, but then we didn't have to set it up for everybody. And so we kind of did that more as a whole class activity and tried to keep it consistent. Or I might have 2 or 3 containers going at the same time, and everybody was shaking, and I would say pass, and you handed it to the next person. So everybody was engaged, but you didn't have to have as much in terms of materials. Does that help?
Yes, except the stations are a little bit different, or the activities are a little bit different, so I'll have to go through them now.
Okay. So
Thank you.
yeah, I try, you may want to do some demos or different groups doing different activities and then sharing out if you don't have the materials or don't want to, commit to. But I would say the balloons with the plaster of Paris, that might be a better demo. And I think we wrote it up to be either demo or group.
I did that as a demo also, but the other 4 were stations, and if they weren't at a station, they had to read out of a book the information that we were covering.
That sounds great. Yeah.
all right. And then, yep, we were trying to be mindful of 5th grade for that 6-7 transition. Yeah, examining air masses, and we tried to do the same materials with the weather unit just so, people didn't have to change up what they had in their classroom. And then we'll get a chance to look at some assessments, maybe not from 7-2A, but that structure is similar. Yeah, so we changed up the volcano in 7-2A and that freakout meter, brainstorming categories, that would be a great challenge extension for some of your higher performing students. That's a great idea.
All right, thanks for all that input. Appreciate you taking the time to take a look at that. And if you have further questions or, something comes up next week or next month or whatever, you can request some, post your question on the helpline that's on the dashboard, or you can always email me and I can get it to the right person. But, the people on our CD team who wrote the units, pilot tested the units, et cetera, we're always happy to help you out if you have ideas or thoughts or questions. All right, so let's talk about some of the resources that are in the enhanced units. We were looking to add a few things to our units when we started these enhancements. One of the things that was important to me as a classroom teacher was to have some novelty regarding how we have kids think about things, share things out. And some of the older units just kind of had a vague, do a gallery walk or something. You're the teacher, you figure it out, do something. And so we started collecting visible thinking routines, some things that I had done in my classroom, some things that we collected from other teachers that they had done, some ideas from Harvard's Project Zero and some other really ambitious science teaching, some great sources. And we put together a whole document full of ideas. And then as we did the enhancements, the curriculum writers would go through that list and choose something that seemed to fit with the content and suggest a visible thinking routine. Usually, almost always it's in the share. So you're not just doing a gallery walk every single time. You don't have to use our suggestion, but it's there if you feel like changing things up, you feel like your kids are getting bored. We heard a lot from teachers that our kids don't have an opportunity to read scientific material. And so we added the differentiated reading guides with the readings. And I'm going to assume that most of you have used those. Even if you're using the older version, the original version of the units, I would be, kind of mining the differentiated reading guides and throwing those in. So hopefully most of you have seen those. And then we also, over time, developed, along with the rest of the NGSS world, a deep appreciation for storylining and how important it is for kids to continue to understand 4 and 5 and 6 weeks out from that first lesson. What are we doing and why, and how is it related to our unit challenge? And so instead of just, again, kind of vaguely saying teachers do something with the bubble map in between each lesson, we did some research, found some great reliable sources, and came up with some navigation routines. And so now at the end of each lesson, at the end of the Check Your Progress for the middle lessons, there's some information that'll tell you, here's what's coming up in the next unit, here's how it's related to what kids just did, here's what you might look for on your class bubble map to make that connection. And if you don't have anything on your class bubble map, here are a couple of quick, easy routines, things you can do with kids as an exit slip, generate some more questions, those kinds of things. And so we make a suggestion at the end of each middle lesson to help you connect and link what you're doing from one lesson to the next. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put you back in those groups that you were in earlier. So you can say hi to everybody that you met already. And I'd like you to, as a group, decide to look at either the visible thinking routines or the navigation routines. And then we have an example of each of those. And I used 8.5B just because it's one of our new units. And And then for the visible thinking teams, there's also a link to that catalog that is part of our resources document. And then for the navigation guides, there's an example from Unit 85B and a link to the MyStar guide. You know, when we do something new, we write up, you know, here's what we're doing and here's why we're doing it. And here are some examples. So I'm going to ask you to, in your group, decide to focus either on the navigation routines or the visible thinking routines. And then take a look at them, have some conversation, and then on your slide, slide 18, 19, or 20, pop in there which one you looked at in the title, and then what did you think was useful about it, or maybe you've used it before and how have you done that, and you know, maybe you can give some hints and tips and tricks to everybody else here, or if you got really motivated and like, oh, I'm going to try this, jot that down. And so have, you know, 1 or 2 people from your group fill in those slides as you have your conversation. All right, so I am going to go ahead and open up those breakout rooms. And again, we're asking you to select one of those 2 to look at, and then have a little conversation and jot down a few ideas. All right, everybody's back. Thanks so much. Let's see if we can do, you know, maybe about just a 15 to 30 second quick summary of each of these, so you can kind of share with the whole group anything that you thought was important or interesting about these things. So team 1 did visible thinking and discussion routines. Somebody from team 1 want to give us just a quick highlights view?
I can do it real quick.
Thank you.
So we talked about how we use all the visual thinking and discussion routines. Like it just brings a lot of variety into the instruction and the learning for the students, because then they don't feel like they're doing the same thing every day. It's not stale. We've seen a lot of different. We've seen a lot of successes with the ones that we talked about, and there's been a couple of discussions where we want to try some new ones next year based off the feedback from everyone else. And we're really hoping to see if implementing these new things will make the learning a lot more easier or even more entertaining for the students to stay engaged with.
Excellent. Thank you. Team 2.
I can talk for team 2.
Thank you.
We have been using several different ones from the visible thinking. One of our members from our group teaches virtually, and so she was talking about some of the difficulties she has, and so these actually help. But one of the things that I talked about was speed dating, and that's what we call it, at least that was when I was doing modeling, and how much the students actually engage in something when they have a limited time and they have a specific purpose for it. And especially when they each group has only one color, so we'll know how much information they shared on theirs or put on theirs because their group's color. So the kids loved that it's called speed dating, but I have to explain what speed dating is in the beginning of it. So
Cool. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. I don't know that I just made a note. I'm going to look up, see if I can find a website that has speed dating described, and I'll add it to the
okay.
list, because that does sound cool. And if not, I might ask you for a
All right.
description.
I'm sure I can find it in my modeling folder stuff.
Oh, that would be wonderful. And just shoot it to me in an email.
Okay.
I'll add it to our list. We stole a lot of great things from the modeling community.
Yeah.
You guys had great ideas. All right, team 3, navigation routines. You guys got gutsy and did the one that people aren't as familiar with.
Mm.
Somebody from team 3 willing to share?
I mean, I can share. We basically we kind of just explored it because none of us had really looked at it yet. Some things that we do like how it's a link from the previous lesson to the next lesson. you know, because every lesson starts with well, yesterday we asked this question, and a lot of times we kind of miss out on what question we are asking. And so it provides a link. So it definitely is helpful.
Okay, good, thanks. Our intention was that this is a 5-minute conversation that you were maybe going to have anyway, and that having it put into the lesson plan would save teachers time from figuring out what is the next lesson and what should I be looking for on the bubble map, by providing you some background. And then, if you are stuck where there's no questions on the bubble map that match, in some units that happens because kids just can't know everything that's coming. They can't know what they don't know sometimes in the very beginning. There are a couple of like exit slip kind of quick things you can do to help kids come up with some new questions. So I'm happy that you're aware that they're there now, and know that we have a guide that has some ideas for if you're really trying to make sure that bubble map, students feel like they're driving instruction, and we have some ideas for how to use it. And again, super happy to give you some ideas and thoughts. If you get stuck, shoot me an email. All right, thanks. I'm going to speak quickly about the unit summary tables and the slide guides, and then I'm going to skip the next activity because Barb has some assessment things she wants to do with you, and I don't want you to be here longer than 5 p.m. We have been talking about unit summary tables revisions for about a year now, and they are all going to be done before you go back to school in August. So we've got almost all of them done now. Lindsay keeps track of all the revisions on that roadmap. And so you can see most of the unit summary tables have been revised. We used some unit summary tables that were developed when some of our teachers worked with Reading Apprenticeship. And they were much more appealing than the old unit summary tables, which were what NGSS had recommended initially. So you'll see the revised unit summary tables that are much more kid-friendly and better for kids to use, for reviewing for quizzes and tests and things like that. Same thing with slides. We had lots and lots of requests to have slides for every lesson for every unit, and we are almost done with those too. So each lesson has a slide set. We recommend that you make a copy of it and then adapt it. It's not meant to be, necessarily perfect for your classroom, but use it as something to work with, and then, add or subtract what you need for your classroom. And Lindsay is offering early access. If you want to see if there's a unit that doesn't have the slide guides or the unit summary tables published yet, but you would like to see them, if you send her an email, she will get you the link. Anything else you need to talk about for that, Lindsay?
And if they're not quite ready yet, I can give you like a timeline of, are they still under development, or am I almost done with the proofread and almost ready to publish and share? Yeah. Okay.
So I was going to put you in your groups and have you look at the slide guides and the unit summary tables, but I'm going to move right on to Barb's assessment piece, because there's a couple things that I think would be really useful for you to do with this, with these assessment things.
All right, just in general, some assessment updates. All of the assessments have been revised. We've been working very hard to make them less text heavy, shorter, fewer phenomenon, and maybe a little bit more coverage for each phenomenon as much as we can. We do need to be scientifically accurate, and sometimes that requires a little more reading than we would like. But just in general, if you've been using assessments from the older units, the non-enhanced units, I would really recommend taking a look at the enhanced assessments. I think they're much easier to use, and I think they're much easier to grade as well. That's really been our intent, is to make them easier for students and easier for teachers. But in addition to revising all of the pre-post tests and all of the embedded assessment, we've also added some extra things that might be helpful for you and for your students in terms of an assessment. So as we write our embedded assessments, we really think about adding 2 new features in the lessons, and you'll find these in the share phase. And one of the things that we will add in a lesson that has an embedded assessment are analysis questions. Analysis questions can be used a lot of different ways, and we're going to have an activity where you're going to look at them and think about some of the different ways you might use them. I've got a few ideas as well. Generally, what we try to do is do something very similar to the embedded assessment. We try to give a new phenomenon, so there's a different context, a little bit of a transfer distance, but the structure of the analysis questions is often very similar, and the style of questions, the subcomponents that are covered are the same. So if we're asking students to use an SEP and DCI content and CCC content in the embedded assessment, you're going to find that in the analysis questions as well. And so they're sort of designed to mimic the EA, but we often put a little more scaffolding. So we might give sentence starters, or we might give fewer options in terms of, you know, selecting. We might give a little bit more text. We might simplify. We might give like some of the graph information. If it's graphing, we might do a few for them and say. So we try to give a little more scaffolding to help students prepare. And these can be really nicely used before, but you may also see some other ways that you can use them too. We also include reteach activities, and these really vary quite a lot depending on the unit. So sometimes the reteach will be another version of the EA and the analysis questions with a new context and maybe even a little more scaffolding. Sometimes the reteach is going to be something completely different. So if we think that students are going to maybe struggle with variables in an embedded assessment, we might give a reteach activity that focuses just on variables, or we might give a reteach activity that focuses just on the SEP or the DCI, and sometimes we give more than one. So, and they're designed to be completed with an adult, but not necessarily in the classroom. So maybe they could be used in a different way. So, you know, you could do this in terms of assessment. You could give your students the analysis questions. You could see who's struggling, give them reteach activities, and then be ready for the EA and hopefully have your students feel very successful with those EAs. So we're going to give you a chance to get into these and look at them and think about how you might use them. And I would really encourage you to go a little out of the box. Like, think about all the different ways these might be used in your classroom beyond just analysis questions. Students who struggle get reteach, students who don't struggle get extension or differentiated readings, you know, and then EA. Think about some other ways you could use these. So we're going to give you some examples from 6.3. And like I said, you know, every unit is a little bit different. You're going to find these in the same lesson as the embedded assessment. And so we're going to take a look at the highlighted links for 6.3 lesson, or unit 6.3 lesson 3. We've got the teacher analysis questions and the slides. I would say please look at the slides. You may want to start though with the EA. You may want to start by looking at the embedded assessment and seeing what students are going to be asked to do in that embedded assessment. And then go back and look at the analysis questions and think about how that might help to prepare your students. And then maybe take a look at the reteach and think about how those all might be useful. So your job is going to be in your team to look at those resources, and then how could you use the analysis questions in your classroom? How could you use reteach activities? How could you use that embedded assessment? And I would encourage you to think outside the box. Please do also look at the slide guides though, because I think particularly when we start to think about some of the reading in embedded assessments and some of the data analysis or things like that that might be required in an embedded assessment, sometimes using those slides to give your students just a little bit of an, you know, kind of a little bit of a preview of the embedded assessment, reading through the scenario together, taking a look at maybe some of the data or the tables, the SEP, and talking about how students might approach those can really help your kids feel successful when they get to some of these. So with no further ado, if nobody has any questions, we'll go ahead and put you in your groups.
All right, everybody's back, Barb.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm seeing a lot of the things that I had thought of too, and a few other things. In my district, any student that didn't get a C or better was required to do a reteach and a retest. I would have probably held these back. But there would have been some students that I might have used the analysis questions with the extra scaffolding. I'm seeing that people are thinking about small group or whole group remediation. I think you've got a lot of options for differentiation using these reteach activities, and then also some extensions. Embedded assessments are great in terms of figuring out where students are before you move on to the next thing. So lots of times an embedded assessment is going to help you see where students are, you know, with some foundational knowledge before we build on it. And that can really help you to see, even after the embedded assessment, who might need a little reteach before they're ready to move on to the next thing. So we've got some really great ideas here. Fantastic. Yep. Some using them in different groups, partners, using the analysis questions as study guides or as reteaches. Those are all great ideas. So one of the other things that we have added to pre-post are grading guidance for you. So this is a way you can look at each question, which each question would have its own phenomenon and then parts as students work through the sense-making process. And then we've used them as suggestions for leveling. So generally, in any question, if you look at these, generally we're going to find that at level 2, we're going to have a couple multiple choice questions. They're generally DCI focused, not always, but generally. And then at level 3, we're usually going to bring in the SEP. Usually at level 4, we're going to ask students to put it all together, and we're going to ask them to look through that lens of the CCC. So they might have to make a prediction using cause and effect. They might have to scale something up or scale something down, and then put it all together with all 3 dimensions, usually in the last part of that question. So you can see there's kind of a nice flow that level 2 are generally the early multiple choice questions. Level 3 is going to involve the DCI plus the SEP, and then level 4 is going to usually bring in that CCC. And that's how we design them. One of the nice things about these pre-post guidance, grading guidance, is that if you want to break the pre-post test up, and maybe you're not giving the whole thing as your assessment, maybe you're going to give question 1 and you're going to use that as a study guide, and you're only going to grade question 3. Or you're going to have grade question 2 for all of your students. You're going to have students complete 1 and 3, but you're going to let them choose which other one you grade. If you wanted to, you could use these to give 3 assessment grades and fill your grade book. So maybe you grade question 1 and they get a grade for that, and you grade question 2 and they get an assessment grade for that, and you grade 3 and you get an assessment grade for that. Now you have 3 assessment grades in your grade book instead of 1. So it's another way, and these, keep in mind, are just recommendations. You can change them, modify them in terms of your own situation. But we put these in here. They're very similar to what we give you in the embedded assessments, but it's just some guidance for you in terms of which parts students should get correct to be at each level. And just a quick reminder of our levels. Level 1 would be, and we don't give you a level 1 because level 2 or level 1 is, students need help even to get to that basic, those first easy multiple choice questions, they need help to get there. At level 2, they're getting mostly DCI knowledge. They have a basic ability to make sense of the phenomenon. Usually they're going to get a couple scaffolding items correct to be at level 2. Level 3, we consider this proficient. So generally, that's going to be the DCI and the SEP. There might be a little CCC. Oftentimes, that last question, they're not answering with a lot of sophistication. Level 4 is mastery, and they are fully integrating all 3 dimensions to make sense. That last question, they should swing for the park. That's going to differentiate between your proficient students and your mastery students. You should really see some sophistication from students that are level 4. Now, if you're using standards-based grading, this is very easy. And we call it a holistic proficiency scale because what we ask you to do is look at your student responses for the entire question. Let's say they get A wrong, but they knock D out of the park. You might say to yourself, well, I'm just going to ding them a little bit. Maybe they misread question A, but I can see evidence in their response to D that they really do understand that DCI knowledge. So maybe there was something in the wording of A that threw them. But if I see evidence in C or D that they have that DCI knowledge, I might not worry too much if they get one of these easy multiple choice early ones wrong. Chris really even suggests maybe starting by grading the last question. And if they knock that out of the park, you might not even really need to do more than just a glance at these other parts, and you might feel comfortable giving them full credit for mastery. So, you may even consider working backwards when you grade. If you're not using standards-based grading and you need to come up with a percent and a grade, there's some different ways you can convert those levels that we're showing you here, those levels into grades. And there's all kinds of these online. You can pick whichever one you like. There's more you could choose from. But if you look at both of these, our recommendation is that a 3-point would be around an A. And you can, of course, go between, like, let's say you've got a student that knocked that last question out of the park, sophisticated, highly, knowledgeable answer, integrating all of the dimensions, making sense, but they got one of those scaffolding questions wrong. You might ding them a little bit and give them a 3.8. So you can, modify this however you want, but we kind of recommend that a 3, if that's proficient, should be somewhere in the A range. But that's up to you in your classroom how you want to use that. So we're going to do a quick activity here where you're going to take a look at, say, for question 2, we've got level 2, they have to get A right. At level 3, B, C, and D. Level 4, they have to get E right. And so let's take a look at some different students and let's figure out what we would grade them. So we've got Emma. She got A, B, C, D all correct, but E is incomplete, that last question. Ahmed got B, C, D, and E correct, but A, missed A. Asia got everything right and nothing is incorrect. So I'd like you to assign a level. Do you think Emma is level 2, level 3, or level 4? And you can always go between levels. So you can give a student a 3.5 or a 3.7 or a 2.8, whatever you would like. And then what grade would you give that student? And why? We don't have a lot of time, so we'll just take a couple minutes. Don't worry about recording, just talk it through.
All right, everybody's back.
All right, thanks everybody. Team 3 is
Like a D
got
with a
close
T.
to completing here, and I know this is super hard to do when you're not actually seeing student responses. You want to see what students actually say, but this was just to give you a feel for it, to make you think about how you might use those grading guides, to think about how you can convert those to grades, that sort of thing. And we run assessment series generally fall and spring. So if you're interested in assessment and want to get deeper into this, definitely come to one of those. So, all right, Chris, thanks.
All right, I'm going to let you share the last slide.
Okay.
We will hang out after 5 o'clock if you have questions. And we just, because it's 5 o'clock and I want to let you go. We did include a slide here with just some ideas if you're looking to fill those last couple weeks without starting a new unit or whatever. Just a reminder that we have all that stuff. Thanks so much for being here. Lindsay will be sending out the agenda and the slide and the video of this by next week. I'll send you the sketch information tomorrow morning. Join our private Facebook group if you haven't yet. And thanks so much.